I made a promise at the outset, so let the leaders begin.
Good evening, Sadi sir.
Still वाले भैया
My name is Anand
थोड़ा आगे हो।
and my question to you is with respect to my limited socialization with the left crowd. It appears as if whenever, for example, a small issue such as the issue of Kashmir, for example, is being discussed, it appears as if the argument which we receive on the other side is that the government actually blindsided you instead of actually realizing the persecution of the Hindus by the other religious fundamentalists present in the area. So my problem is, when I speak about left, I am predominantly focusing upon the Marxism. So my question to you in the same line is Marxism and the left group, because it appears as if they are only able to communicate and socialize with the left itself and not with any other group. So my question is the ideology of Marxism and left, is it conducive for a segmental, modern and traditional society such as America?
I'll start from something that you'll be able to relate to in your own peer groups. Assume for a moment that you're from the non-left and you have friends from the left.
आगे से नहीं दिया
Will you cancel people merely because they are from the non-left? I think you would still say friendship is different and ideology is different. You would still be okay with that. But by and large, on the left, what I've seen is if you don't subscribe to my circle or my viewpoint, you're out. Okay? इसी को फतवा कहते हैं. Let's go deeper. ये डायलॉग बाजी नहीं है. Let's go deeper. मार्क्सिज्म और लेफ्टिज्म का एक कॉमन टेम्पलेट है, which is to say, if you're not with me, by definition, you're against me. That clearly shows ये विचारधाराओं की बात नहीं है, ये वहाँ से बेसिक सिद्धांतों की और मूल्यों की बात है, which effectively goes back to faith systems. So when someone says Marxism का किसी भी धर्म या नॉट धर्म, किसी रिलीजन से कोई कनेक्शन नहीं है और वो और निकलेगा. Which is why the template of the left and the Marxists is so Abrahamic in nature. The otherization is inbuilt, it is central to the worldview. The definition of the self starts with the definition of the other, with the exclusion of the other. And that is an immutable creed of that particular faith system. It is a non-negotiable principle. क्योंकि अगर वो ही नहीं रहा तो बचेगा क्या? Okay? So, as far as I'm concerned, a civilization that believes in the concept of samanvaya, and the dark-skinned man from the south of India, samanvaya का अर्थ बता दो कोई यहाँ से. What is the meaning of samanvaya? Samanvaya to me largely translates to building consensus. सबको जोड़ के आगे ले जाना. I'm not hinting at सबका साथ सबका विश्वास. I'm saying samanvaya is central to our thinking pattern, which is to say, if you decide that we have to coexist and we have to live by each other, you have to make a few compromises, I have to make a few compromises. So let us see what are those lines that we draw between our respective thought processes. Which is why it has been possible for so many sampradayas and so many panths regardless of their ethnicity, coming from either Central Asia or let's say all these places before the advent of Christianity and Islam, for them to come here in one way or the other, and even if they came as invaders, they would then assimilate and become part of this particular country. Think of Bharat as a vessel, which has the propensity, it's literally an Akshay Patra, which has the propensity to accept and blend and make you part of this pool. The only example so far, or at least perhaps the two striking examples, is that जो यहाँ पे शरणार्थियों के तौर पे आए थे, which is Yahudi and Parsi, वो यहाँ पे घुल मिल गए. लेकिन जो अपने आप को, if you think of yourself as a conqueror, you will continue to behave like a conqueror. So if conquest is the goal, and it is passed from one generation to another, no wonder you are where you are today, we are where we are today. Whereas everybody else seems to just bend and live. Right? So Marxism is a secularized offshoot of a very clear process which has a very clear religious inspiration. No wonder it behaves this way. And therefore it constantly seeks war. It wants class war. It wants segregation. It wants to pit people against each other. So never be surprised when you find Marxists arraying themselves alongside others against the indigenous identity. It is the natural course of things. You should never be surprised. This is exactly how they have operated. I have dedicated a specific subsection of the book to this particular point as to why they are able to operate the same way. Marxism effectively says that they are anti-colonial. Read what Marx said. He clearly said that the material basis of and the, let's say, production of knowledge, the Asiatic system must be completely destroyed. He said this of both Bharat and China. He said this over and over again. And colonialism, although I oppose it, has this incidental beneficial, let's say, outcome, which leads to destruction of the Asiatic ways of looking, Asiatic ways of thinking. So therefore I will support it. That was his position. You should simply, so the entire point is, you don't need to generate new arguments. This book is necessarily a darpan ki tum ye ho. That's what I want you guys to start doing in wherever you're talking about these issues. Arm yourself with facts. You can perhaps have a disagreement with, let's say, logic after a certain point of time. But let's say the superstructure of logic will always crumble at the slightest hint of a pebble of fact. One fact is enough. So therefore, to answer your question, don't be surprised, and I say this bluntly, Marxism is fundamentally a cancer which has survived in this country, unfortunately. It has destroyed enough lives, it has destroyed enough civilizations, but hopefully this civilization will respond even to this particular challenge. After all, Steve was team went all over the place, came here and lost. Right? Next.
I'm Manvi. My question comes from social construction from point of view in social psychology. I'm trying to see it from that lens. When the conversation happens that we have a choice to have our identity markers. You're talking, the left asks us to dismiss our faith. It starts from that, right? And here you are asking, if not you, then this idea is asking to dismiss the coloniality that has been inherited in us. But isn't it in a way a form of paradox as well? Because here also there is certain identity markers which are convenient for us that in some way, if not the popular discourse is asking us to be chosen. And another point that I wanted to make is, the popular culture is what, even if we are in academia and we don't like talking about popular culture much, but that is what shapes us. And the popular culture is in itself has a colonial mindset, and that has shaped us. And this conversation we are having in academia, so how much can it actually work in shaping us? In real sense.
So let's assume with the premise that I understood your question right. Okay? Your basic point is they asked us to discard or give up a few things. When I basically say give up coloniality, I'm also asking you to give up a few things, and therefore there's a paradox in it. Right? So let me try and answer that. Okay? to basically say अपनी जड़ों से जोड़ के रहो and avoid the acts which is trying to sever the relationship between you and your roots is not the same thing. So there is a false symmetry in your question, is my humble opinion. Which is to say, just because you're entitled to say, let's say, just because he says, give up your identity, and I am saying, give up anything that requires you to give up your identity, they're not the same. How can they be the same? You're focusing on the fact that both of these involve giving up something, as opposed to asking what is the end game here, or what is the end goal here. You used the word identity, right? If you look at the book and if you read it, I've consciously struck a distinction between identity and consciousness. I am basically saying identity is merely an external marker, whereas consciousness is what you practice on a daily basis. Which is to say, आप नाम में तो हिंदू हो सकते हैं या नाम से तो हिंदू हो सकते हैं, लेकिन क्या आपका आचरण हिंदू जैसा है? Do you practice that particular philosophy or that particular way of life on a regular basis? That is the distinction between identity and consciousness. The book or my position is not based on identity politics at all. It is based on consciousness politics. सोचने का जो तरीका है, जो आपकी धारणाएं होती हैं, उसके बारे में ही ये पुस्तक है. So I am clearly saying something that pits you against your own roots cannot positively be conducive to you as even a person unless you're able to show that what is being imposed on you, whether with your consent or without your consent, is better than what you are already following. For a new idea to replace an old idea, assuming that there is no force that is being used, it has to prove itself on the ability to satisfy everything that the previous guy was doing plus something. Correct? Otherwise, how can replacement happen? There is no need for a substitute unless and until you are a better product. Right? You show me how you are a better product, removing all the external factors. I have been either subjected to invasion or I have been subjected to colonization. I have never been given the freedom to say, take out both these variables from the equation and let me ask for myself, if you are truly good for me. That question, now you have to start asking. Okay? So, I don't think that symmetry or the equivalence that you have drawn, I don't think you did it consciously. I'm just saying that there is an underlying false symmetry there. I don't think that works. Okay. Second, whether it's the judiciary or even the academia, I don't think any of these institutions give an influence. Obviously, there is a severe and a serious influence of pop culture. Okay. But what is it that I think either the judiciary does through its training and what the academia does is that you will try to look for sound patterns in the noise. Think what is going on under the surface. Pop culture for our practical purpose is showing the top story. You're trying to understand what is happening under the surface. So, obviously, you can't become someone who is completely dissociated from this entire system and then analyze it. Because that will create a paradox in itself. Unless and until you live in it and you let's say suffer it or you feel its influence, you will never be able to speak of it with conviction. Okay? So I think this is a necessary evil in that particular sense. I won't call it an evil, it's a necessity. Academia, the more and more it moves away from society and pop culture, will come out with, let's say, ridiculous propositions in terms of proposals. I'll give you a straightforward example from my own profession. Under the Advocates Act, people who are in the business of, let's say, who are in the realm of teaching law are not allowed to practice. In no other jurisdiction it happens. And law is fundamentally a vocational profession. That's why it's called practice, like doctors. The more you apply it, you're better at it. Proposals that typically come on let's say, policy-related issues from the academic fraternity, I'm not faulting them, I'm not saying anything. I'm saying, if they had the benefit of practicing as well, their proposals would be much more implementable on the ground and in sync with what happens on the ground. Assume for a moment that you know jack about litigation at all, and you've just been an academic all your life who's been teaching law. You come and talk to me about litigation, the first thing I want to ask is, kabhi court mein kadam rakha hai ki nahi rakha hai? Agar nahi rakha hai, move. You know nothing about what happens in the court. You have no idea how this particular procedure works. You don't know what is the life cycle of a particular case. You have no position to talk about these issues. Okay? That will be my very first response. Right? So I believe that one of the fundamental things that we must perhaps try and do is to break these silos. the distinction that we try and create between academia and industry is largely a Western binary. Because, and in fact it's not even a Western binary, it's a perceived Western binary, because even the West does not believe in this. Every time a Western economy hits recession, the first thing that they do is to go to universities and ask them for ideas and solutions. Because there's an active industry interaction that goes on with the academia. That doesn't happen in Bharat as much, despite the focus on this. According to me, this particular paradigm needs to be applied not just in the realm of engineering or education, it must apply in the social sciences. A friend of mine works in an NGO, and Bharat is effectively the crucible for all these NGOs who are all in the business of social justice, samajik work. क्यों आते हैं आपको बाद में पता चलेगा. Social work in this country is secularized missionary work, period. So what happens here is, they come here and what they do is that they have no idea how caste or jati works on the ground. They proceed on the basis of pop culture notions. अगर आप इस जाति से हैं, then you will proceed on the basis that this is an oppressed and this is the oppressor. Period. Ground में क्या होता है पता नहीं. No idea. So here's an instance where they are the ones constantly asking for data, but when you ask them for data and empirical evidence to back up all their asymptotic propositions, they have nothing to back it up with. They only have books written by opinion makers, but not people who have actually managed to collect first-hand data. This is the extent to which even social works, so to speak, or let's say the social entrepreneurship industry operates at this point. That is the danger. So that means if there is a fund allocation that has to happen with respect to a particular issue, they will start. This comes from the M community, the minority community, तो पैसा इन्हीं को दो क्योंकि ये यहाँ पे शोषित है, पीड़ित है, त्रासित है, सब कुछ है. That's the assumption. And in this, what they have done is that all your experience of your societies, you have projected it onto us. The way you treat African Americans, you have decided we treat our people here. So, Jati Pratha is equated with race, and then you start getting all these false parallels. So, therefore, I consciously believe that there must be a certain degree of emphasis as part of these academic programs. Jao, fieldwork karo, publish karo, let me see if you really have anything to show for your positions or not. If you don't have it, a publication that does not have first-hand data when it comes to these sensitive issues should not be allowed in any peer-reviewed journal in the first place. So I don't think it helps to have this binary, which is, and here's the interesting part. What I realized as part of my own practice is that every time I have a discussion with someone from the academia, from the legal academia, there is a certain degree of hubris and there is a certain degree of pride in not being part of the litigation fraternity and then being able to comment on it. You take a lot of pride in not knowing the practicalities because you believe I am not touched by this dirt, which is practice, and therefore my positions are relatively objective. Sorry, these are self-congratulatory labels that you have given to yourself. ये आपसे किसी ने कहा कि आप सही हैं, right? So I think these walls need to be broken. And I hope it starts with the humanities. It's a very serious problem with the humanities because in science, at the end of the day, it's very difficult to fool around as far as data or mathematics is concerned or even physics is concerned. But here, it starts with a proposition, it ends with a proposition, there is no data in between. Next. Yes. I don't want to ignore people sitting at the top. I'm sure there are quite a few hands.
So let me ask you a question.
If you don't mind, I'll come to you next. Mr. Shah, let him ask. Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, since you mentioned keywords caste and data in the same sentence, I want to know your opinions on caste census and the attempts by various governments to stop it from getting published over many years.
So, I believe that census as an activity from the standpoint of just number collection would be wrong because I am fundamentally against the manner in which caste is defined today. I have taken the position very clearly in the book, saying that in the last 75 years, there has been no attempt to move away from the administrative structures and definitions created by the British man as far as the Varnashram Dharma in Bharat is concerned. And there are very clear records as to how they moved certain castes up and down as part of their census to not just create a divide, but also to create a sense of oppression and then reduce the resistance that was being given to the British. So for instance, I'll give you a very clear example. If you don't mind me asking, you're welcome to refuse to answer this question. Which part of the country are you from? Rajasthan. Okay. So, have you heard of the Madurai Nayaks, the Nayaka kings of Madurai? So these are people who were previously the generals of Krishnadeva of the Vijayanagara Empire, who then went on to establish their own kingdoms. So if you go to Madurai, one of the go-to places is the Nayak Mahal. Okay. So the Madurai Nayaks and there are other communities called the Polygars. Okay. These are specific communities who were created under the British. The Polygars effectively come from certain martial communities in the south. Okay. So in Madurai, so if you go to Tamil Nadu, there are three Kshatriya communities largely. You have the Kaunars, they were the Vaniyars. So the Vaniyars come from the Salem and the, let's say, Salem region. The Kaunars come from the Kongu region, which is in Edo, Coimbatore and Tirupur. And if you go to the Devas, they come from the Madurai side. These people were so militant in their opposition, rightly so, against the British, is that the British establishment was limited to the forts that they established. The moment they went out, they'd be chopped off, they'd be hacked to death. And they would also have the support of other communities in terms of indoctrinating them on a regular basis, ensuring that they have minimum material supply and everything. Around that period is when the caste census is undertaken slowly. They start the process. Madras Presidency is where caste was created. Read this fantastic book called The Caste of the Mind by Nicholas Dietz. And while this is a book that he's published, I think in 2002, his work on the subject dates back to 1992, at least from that. I've cited a significant amount of his work as part of my book. How they started doing that, and how missionaries, Christian missionaries, his name is Francois Habe, who was a Portuguese missionary operating in the Madras Presidency, his book on Jati Pratha was used as the basis for an administrative census. So what they do, they then approximate everything, and they realize, इससे इतनी तकलीफ हो रही है, इसको नीचे कर देते हैं और मशीन and उसे ये कहते हैं, ये जो है ना, ये छोटी शिक्षा करने वाला, ये तुम्हें शोषित कर रहा है. They push that and they start creating it right. It's there in their works. The Governor General of Madras Presidency purchases this particular book by paying the price for the copyright transfer. He gives that missionary enough money to last him for almost the rest of his life. So, before you start with the caste census, I would say start with the definitions. That's a long overdue process because the most weaponized form of identity in this country is neither gender nor religion, it is caste. Unfortunately so. And therefore there needs to be a very serious conversation on this. And it can't start with rhetoric, it needs to start with knowledge, it needs to start with facts, it needs to start with data. Emotional gap, alien. You start with that first. The attempt has been to say, इतने सारे subjects में research के लिए scope है और उसकी need है, why are you not doing it? Now the state is not doing it because the state has a very clear political incentive to keep the caste arithmetic alive because it translates to arithmetic. And you can't pass the state beyond a point. चाहे किसी भी सरकार हो, I am very careful about my trust levels on sensitive issues. When the voting opportunity comes, I know which way the vote goes. But my fundamental, let's say, sense of reluctance or my circumspection with the state will always remain. Simply because the state still thinks like a colonial state. जिस दिन भारत का जो राष्ट्र है और जो राज्य है भारतीय तरीके से अपने आप को सोचना शुरू करेगा, तब मैं उस पर ज्यादा भरोसा करूंगा, तब तक नहीं करूंगा. On this, what we have basically said is at least the society and universities must start talking about it. But that entire domain is occupied by post-colonial Marxist and Leninist establishment, which says जाति, वर्ण, कुला, कास्ट सबको मिला के खिचड़ी बनाओ, पर ये never extricate it. Never make it clear for people to understand what is the difference between these words. Because it starts with language. You wanted a caste census, you did not ask for a Varna census. You didn't ask for a Jati census. There is a huge distinction. In that book, you will see proof of the fact that caste comes from casta, which is the first Portuguese word. Why Portuguese word? Why Portuguese word? Because they were the first colonizers of this country, not the British word. Madras was primarily established by the Portuguese, at least the establishment that we know today. The St. Thomas Basilica that's on the St. Mount shore was previously the Kapaleshwara temple, which had to be pulled and taken away to a different place because they destroyed it. So you go to the Kapaleshwara temple in Mangalore, on the outside you'll see a board which clearly says, Mandir, all its traditional Puranic descriptions show the temple as being closer to the coast. Usko wahan se push karna padha. Right? Anyways, the point is, since they had notions of kasta in their communities and society, they imposed it here. किसी भी मुद्दे का solution या हल जो है परिभाषा से नहीं करता है. Language and परिभाषा, semantics, that's where the game is. Because you see how it works on campuses. नाम दे दो, ठप्पा लगा दो, बात खत्म. ये संघी है, इसका मुंह बंद करो. ये सवर्ण है, इसका मुंह बंद करो. ये वो है, मुंह बंद करो. Anybody who has control over history and language has control over destinies. Next. Yes. I promised a gentleman here, so we'll start. Yes.
Sir, I just want to ask, firstly, I thank Bloomsbury for this publication, India This Bharat. I just want to, my father is not Anushari, my father is Satyagar Singh from South Haryana, 1973 born.
I'm so sorry, I can't hear you.
My father's name is Satyagar Singh, 1973 born.
Okay.
Satyagar Singh from South Haryana, no.
Okay.
I'm little dark skinned, not that much, but I'm little dark skinned. Okay, sir. But my question is, can you just answer me? There are a lot of future bureaucrats sitting here, and we read a lot of Spectrum. There is a book from publication Spectrum. Okay. So modern history book. So how?
What is Spectrum again? Please tell me.
Modern history. Modern history of India. Preparing for people preparing for UPSC, IAS and IPS and IPS all over. So can you please tell us how to forget Lord Macaulay's Minute of Education? So it's not about asking left versus right. हमें एक तोड़नी है. Let me tell you, I'm from political science. I'm BA political science honors from Satyavati College Evening. And there is a class board. He's in campus. This is Hansraj, you are giving your lecture here. I'm from Satyavati Evening here in Ashok Vihar. And we are in North Campus. I'm from Home Campus. I give entrance in the North Campus. I came from KMC and I'm a PhD, political science. And I'm talking to here because of my whatever I done. I'm talking to here because I come here in Hansraj. Okay, sir. Just I want to ask you one question. How can I forget Lord Macaulay's Minute of Education? कैसे मैं उसको भूल सकता हूँ? And मतलब irrelevant of I'm dark skinned, I'm from South Haryana, Karnataka. Whatever Karnataka is going on, hijab कुछ भी चल रहा है वहाँ पे. How can I forget कि मैं यहाँ पे खड़ा हूँ और मैं उसको भूल जाऊँ पढ़ रहा हूँ? आप raise down.
See, I think
I have written your LinkedIn. You have seen that. My name is Ashish.
I usually don't respond to you because
No. You have seen this. You have liked to me. Hardik Shubhkamnaएं.
Let me respond.
Just answer it.
Right. See, I think your question is को और थोड़ा provocative बना देती है. Which is, sir, आप तो UPSC के लिए appear नहीं हो रहे. आप ना, I'm saying, आप तो वकील हैं. तो आप भाषण के निकल जाएंगे. इसके बाद जो हमें entrance में देना, no, I get that. Let me just answer your question. Just a second. So the question is, it's a very practical question because a lot of people after reading the book are saying, how do I, with this conscious knowledge, appear for the ready interviews? How do I respond? Because the first response will get me kicked out. Right? I'll say, think like a certain group of people. वहाँ पे जो बोलना है बोलो. उनको जो सुनना है उनको सुना.
वहाँ पे नहीं बोलना सर. आपने कहा I'm from dark skin from south. मैं dark skin नहीं हूँ, मैं हरियाणा से हूँ.
I get it.
मैं वहाँ पे नहीं बोलूँगा. आपने चाहे वो बात की वहाँ नहीं बोलूँगा.
Okay, just hold on. Let me just answer this question.
I disagree with you from a lot of points, sir.
You can disagree with me. Allow me to answer the question and you can then disagree.
I'm not from America. मैं साउथ हरियाणा से आता हूँ. मैं दिल्ली से हूँ. पर फिर भी मैं आंसर नहीं करूँगा. वहाँ जब बोलना है मैं नहीं बोलूँगा. पता है क्यों नहीं बोलूँगा?
जी.
The reason is I read your book.
Right.
आप अगर यहाँ पे कह रहे हैं ना कि my book is this, I'm from this, I'm from low, I'm IIT से हैं, I'm from here. मैं सबके किस फैमिली में खड़ा हूँ आपसे क्वेश्चन. It's my legacy. You are
I'm answering the question. Have the patience to listen.
You can't say this. वो वहाँ बोलना है वो बोलो. You can't say this.
Hold on to this. Hold on. Just hold on to this. Let's take this in a very practical level. Let me answer this in a very practical level. You've been seeing the videos of these coaching institutes that have come out. Right? You've seen all of this. आपको लगता है कि इन 7 सालों में 2014 से इस मानसिकता में कोई परिवर्तन आया है? नहीं आया है। गवर्नमेंट की मानसिकता में परिवर्तन हो सकता है, लेकिन अभी तक ब्यूरोक्रेसी में नहीं हुआ है। From the standpoint of even acceptance, entrance से लेके कोचिंग से लेके ये मानसिकता बदली हुई है। Correct? Okay. What does that tell you? What are the realities? Realities are your position does not have state support today. Right? And I'm talking to those students because I refuse to buy this premise that everybody who prepares for UPSC necessarily comes from a Khata Pita family. No, that's not the case. I've seen children of farmers appearing for this out of a sense of service. I've seen people from a variety of backgrounds. Rajendra mein padhe rehte hain saal. Every year they do this. It would be mighty irresponsible on my part to tell them, मैंने एक पुस्तक लिखी है, इसको जाके उनके मुंह पे फेंको. Because what will happen is, my book will become popular, and I can think that I've initiated a revolution. In the process, what happens to certain lives? So, if I can vouch for this, and there are photos of this on Twitter and other places, my suggestion to all these students, these idealistic students, I've written this as part of my signature. Enter the system, but do not let the system change you. Despite the fact that there are other members, I'm answering your question. Hold on.
I live in Rupnagar.
I leave to the fair ministers of the audience to decide whether I should proceed or not.
You wrote a note.
Okay, so let's have a show of hands here. Did I refuse to answer the question? Am I not trying to at least address the question very clearly in terms of what is practical? Yes. Okay. If you wish to use the book and pop a snook at the bureaucracy, more power to you. Please do it. Because effectively it will be tricky मेरी पढ़नी मेरी, because जो इस book को पढ़ के अंदर जाएंगे and use the exam only as an entrance and not pay attention to it beyond that, तब भी मेरी ही जीत होगी. आप जैसे लोग जाके उनको बोलेंगे कि आप गलत हैं, तब भी मेरी जीत होगी. My point is very, very simple. You have to realize sometimes, think like a Shivaji, don't necessarily stick your head out and have it beheaded. Because if he had to adopt what is known as the Banzai attack in Japan, when he's outnumbered, he wouldn't have been able to build an empire. His successors wouldn't exist. Think very, very clearly. Be realistic. Your ideals and goals need not change, but the strategy can change depending on the circumstances. Period. Be very, very clear about this. I do not want indict-minded children to be kept out of the system under any circumstances merely because they have said something. उसका भी वक्त आएगा, उसका भी समय आएगा, अपना नंबर आएगा. Until then, focus on the fact that no matter what happens around you, you have decided to serve this motherland and its thought process. You will never be deviated from this particular path. That focus must be laser sharp. If the one thing that I can confidently say that I've brought as part of my personality anywhere is laser sharp focus. I will never, nobody will be able to deviate me from what I want to do and what I've set out to do under any circumstances. So, my suggestion to you is, so let's look at it this way. What do IIT aspirants do? You really think they take the schooling system seriously? No, they just have to clear the exam, but their focus is on IIT coaching and getting into IIT. That's it. Have that sense of detachment as far as the syllabus of IAS and the training is concerned. Detached. ये एक एग्जाम है जो क्लियर करना है. ये आपकी विचारधारा या फिर आपके वर्ल्ड व्यू को किसी भी हालत में नहीं बदलेगा. As long as you go in with that, I think you're safe. I think you're 100% safe. Today you are not in a position to, so wait. Next. Yes.
Jai Shri Ram, sir.
Jai Shri Ram.
So, first of all, I would just like to say that I dislike you. I didn't dislike you earlier, but because you said that you will give precedence to the people who dislike you, I made myself dislike you now.
She is just a proof of what I just said earlier. Yes, please. Go on.
Sir, you said that you want to bring small conversations and campus conversations in this country, and you want to initiate these small conversations which will take which will bring about a revolutionary change in an incremental manner. And this is exactly what I think happens everywhere, and I think that this is not bringing change as of now. And I don't find it very substantial. And because you said that सत्य आपके पक्ष में है, इतिहास आपके पक्ष में है, परंतु मैं एक सेकंड ईयर हिस्ट्री वाला स्टूडेंट हूँ और मैं आपको बहुत ही पूर्ण रूप से बता सकती हूँ कि ऐसा बिल्कुल भी नहीं है। आपने फिर यही बोला, ये आपकी बातों में ही सब्सटेंशिएट हो रहा है क्योंकि आप कह रहे हैं कि लेफ्ट इफेक्टिवली आर्ग्यूज दैट इट इज द गार्डियन, इट इज द सोल गार्डियन ऑफ हिस्ट्री। तो आप ये बताइए कि मैं ये पढ़ती हूँ कि सबरीमाला डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी है, कामाख्या माता डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी है, और हम तैमूर लंग को पढ़ते हैं, हम कहते हैं कि तैमूर लंग ने कुछ गलत नहीं किया, सब वहाँ पे उस टाइम पे ऐसे नहीं होता था। सोमनाथ मंदिर के बारे में हम पढ़ते हैं तो हमें बोला जाता है कि कोई बात नहीं, वहाँ पे जब हिंदू राजा भी होते थे वो भी अपने मंदिरों को तोड़ देते थे। उसके ऊपर मैं ये कहना चाहती हूँ कि हिंदू राजा, अगर कोई एक हिंदू अपने घर को तोड़ के फिर बनाए तो क्या ये मुसलमान को राइट दे रहा है कि वो हमारे हिंदुओं का घर तोड़ दे? ठीक है, मैं ये सारे विचारों को आपके समक्ष रख रही हूँ और मैं ये भी सोचती हूँ कि
Could you crystallize this as a question? Throw it at me. What is the question?
सर, आपने कहा कि शास्त्रार्थ में पराजय स्वीकार करनी चाहिए। ठीक है, आप जब ये बोल रहे हैं तो आप इफेक्टिवली रिलाई कर रहे हैं लेफ्ट के कॉन्शियंस पे कि वो डिफीट स्वीकार करेगा, जो कि मेरे हिसाब से नहीं होगा, क्योंकि मैं एक सेम कोट करना चाहती हूँ जो मेरी माँ मुझे बार बार बोलती है कि खर को कहा गजा लेकर मरकट भूषण, गज को कहा सरे गंगाए भौरी धरे गोठन, पाहुन पतित बाण नहीं भेदत, रीतो करत निशन, सूरदास तारी कमर पर चढ़त न दूजो रंग।
Explain that for my benefit.
So that means कि सूरदास तारी कमर पर चढ़त न दूजो रंग, इसका मतलब कृष्ण जी की कमर तो काली है, उसके ऊपर दूसरा कलर क्या ही चढ़ सकता है? अगर एक छोटा सा पत्थर है, क्या वो एक बाण को बेच सकता है? नहीं बेच सकता ना। और मैं यही सारे इन सारे उदाहरणों का अर्थ यही है कि ये बहुत ही छोटे स्टेप्स हैं, क्या ये बहुत ही मैसिव मूवमेंट ला सकते हैं? और यही मेरा क्वेश्चन है।
So let me try and answer this quickly. I think it's a fantastic question because for one good reason, there is a clear hunger for a revolution, right? So I'm happy that this exists. For me, the fact that there is a hunger for revolution, तो मुझे ये थोपने की जरूरत नहीं है, ये अंदर से आ रहा है. Brilliant. Okay. Now I will tell you what has happened in my limited experience over the last 6 years, ever since I started in Canada. Pay attention and answering your question, right? So I started talking on these subjects from 2016 onwards. I've been vocal. It's not that I've been talking only then. I've been doing this since my law school days, or even before. In certain institutions, जिनको आप वामपंथ का गढ़ मानते हैं, प्रीवियसली क्या होता था कि जो बच्चे उनसे मतभेद रखते हैं, they would not talk about it for the fear of being hounded out, right? 370 के टाइम पे आपने देखा ये सब हुआ, right? Do you really believe that the institution that is just cancelled ruling, it's a matter of just coincidence? That there was an invitation extended to the students of that particular institution, you don't see that as a sign of change? इसके पहले ये बहुत कम होता था. Institutions like there's a Mumbai-based institution which focuses on social work and social service, right? In those institutions, literally PhDs are written, according to me, which are separatist material and secessionist material. which is asking for टुकड़े होंगे. That's it. Period. They're very clear about it. घुमा फिरा के बात करते हैं, लेकिन बात तो वही है. Okay? From those institutions, people have written saying we have initiated not just conversations, we are fighting on the ground whenever these topics come about. Please remember one thing. ऐसा नहीं है कि इसके पहले आपके पास तर्क नहीं था या आर्ग्यूमेंट्स नहीं थे. What is it that me or let's say people like me, what is it that we're trying to do? Or other people like we're trying to do? रीढ़ की हड्डी को मजबूत करना कि जहां भी है लड़ना सीखो, बात करना सीखो, अपने पक्ष को क्लियरली रखना सीखो. That is the central contribution. Everything else is secondary. Okay? This is happening in national law schools. This is happening in institutions which are oriented towards gender studies and whatnot. You have to realize that this has come from a point जहाँ पे पहले all the books written by Sitaram and Ramswarup were self-published, or they had to create their own publication house. From there, we have travelled to a certain place where so-called Western publications are putting out my works and the works of Dr. Meenakshi Jain and others. Right? I'm not saying therefore let's be complacent. I'm saying recognize that a certain distance has already been travelled. Okay? And I'm not even in favor of, let's say, incremental steps. I never said any of those things. My entire point was, ये जो दीवारें हैं कॉलेज के अंदर, इसको भेजने की कोशिश करनी चाहिए as much as possible. Because according to me, anybody who says he's the left or anybody who says the right, both of them are operating on the same thing. What have I always said? What is the replacement or the substitute for right wing? Exactly. I've never called myself right, and whenever I did that, I immediately bit my tongue. Not doing it again, ever. So, language may change हो रहा है. People are willing to, at a time when you have the maximum possible distraction through social media, either through TikTok or whatnot, if somebody is willing to listen to a lecture either by Sandeep Balakrishna or a lecture by me or anybody else, that is a sign that there is a clear audience listening and consuming. That's a huge positive according to me. Not just that. पहले तो सिर्फ resolutions निकला करते थे whenever there was something that was called Sanghi. Now there are counter resolutions also. Student bodies are clearly fighting on this point. So I don't think these are merely incremental. But multiplier effect कौन create कर सकता है? Let me come to the question. Individuals like me can only do what the squirrel did in the building of the Ram Setu. We are doing what we can. Multiplier effect हमेशा create होता है states. नेहरूवियन मार्क्सिस्ट डिस्पेंसेशन अगर इतने दिन ये कर पाया बिकॉज जहां से पीछे से उनके गॉडफादर का हाथ था उनके सर पे, which effectively gave them the first mover advantage, plus consistent investment for close to 70 years, और आज भी है. No wonder they immediately rise up to the defense of the particular establishment. So each time people can vouch for this, in several places have basically criticized the current dispensation, saying आपके तरफ से ये इन्वेस्टमेंट कहाँ है? Curriculum में, humanities में, archaeology में, in all these issues. So I think that multiplier effect, your anger and your frustration is justified. Your criticism is justified. I am merely saying मैं हट जाता हूँ, आप इनसे बात कीजिए. Because that criticism is to be directed there. Because you see, the purpose of the state is not just formulation of policy. Policies are typically created by the society. The purpose of the state is to provide a fantastic megaphone for the dissemination of the policy and thought. The state is moving at an incremental pace, whereas the society is moving at the pace of a geometric progression. That is the difference. So one hopes that the state realizes that the society is ready for this radical change, that students like you exist, and therefore when they come up with reforms in education, they will have your confidence and your support to defend those policies. नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी जब बाहर आया था, इसके खिलाफ इतने सारे आर्टिकल्स लिखे गए थे. सिंपल क्वेश्चन, हाउ मेनी ऑफ यू डिसाइडेड टू राइट ऑन द पॉजिटिव्स ऑफ द नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी, ऑन इट्स लैंग्वेज एस्पेक्ट्स, ऑन इट्स हिस्ट्री एस्पेक्ट्स? बिकॉज यू हैव डिसाइडेड कि सरकार अपने आप को बचा लेगी. 370 में भी यही हुआ था, सीए में भी यही हुआ था. Why is the majority effectively believing that silence is its golden trait? You should not take pride in being a silent majority. Be a vocal majority. Only then you give them the confidence. Because you see, put yourself in the shoes of the politician. His first question is going to be, हम तो विचारधारा इसके नाम पे कर लेंगे, अगली बार जब इलेक्शन होगा हम वापस आएंगे कि नहीं आएंगे. That is the first thing he's going to ask, because a significant amount of investment has gone into this. और इतना सब कुछ करने के बाद if they move out of power, जो सत्ता में नहीं है और उसके बावजूद इतना सब कुछ कर सकते हैं to destroy the fabric of this particular country, अगर वो वापस आ जाएंगे तब क्या होगा? So it is for you to give the confidence to people in power that we will criticize you when you are wrong, but we will also vocally support you when we believe that you are doing something in the interest of this particular civilization. That has to start. You don't need to do this on a regular basis. And the last person who is ever going to ask you to effectively join what I would call a Kavali Mandali. I won't use it Bhajan Mandali. Yeah? No, it's trying to change the language. Okay. Give credit where credit is due. But when you need to tell them that boss, we have chosen you because you are the only vikalp that this particular society and this particular civilization unfortunately has. We wish we had more vikalp. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We have very few options. But if you two don't deliver, तो किसके पास जाएं? These are questions for you to ask. Okay? So, on a regular basis, you have no idea the number of times I've been told by this side for these questions. What is this? What is this? ये तो asking का sum है, वहाँ से आया है, यहाँ से आया है. अरे, I'm asking for an apolitical approach to some of these issues. Because some of these issues, if you tie them entirely to politics, then you're playing a 20-20 match when you should be playing a test match. You should be thinking of the next 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, because you're sitting next to a belligerent civilization state called China. Don't focus on Pakistan, because it's effectively a stooge of China. If you have to prepare for China, then the thinking has to be long term. Who's what godfather? Okay. So after the eldest son dies, there is a meeting where all the bosses meet, and on the way back, Vito Corleone tells his consigliere, what does he say? This was not Atame all along, this was Barzini. That's his position. It's not Pakistan all along, it's China. इसकी औकात क्या है? औकात क्या है? He is effectively not an officer friend of China, he is an officer concubine of China. Considering that, you need to be able to focus on these issues. Who is the puppeteer? Focus on that, not on the strings alone or on the puppets alone. You're focusing on the puppet all the time, but looking at who is the puppeteer. If you have to prepare for that, then the thinking has to change. Fundamentally, it has to change. So the best part of your question is that you represent that part of the society that is willing to take charge of this particular issue, and therefore once an initiative becomes owned by the society, rest assured it will go on. Because the state has an incentive which is political in nature, the society has a deeper incentive which is cultural and civilization. So fantastic. Next. So how many more questions are in your position today? It's 7:30. I won't run away, don't worry.
So good evening sir, this is Shubham.
Just a second, just ask the organizers. Why you want to take a question? Excuse me. Just a second. So yeah, sign करना क्या? 8 just a second. 8 p.m. Questions at 8 p.m. You've taken me for granted, that's okay. So okay, we come to the gentleman first, and then we come back.
Good evening sir, this is Shubham Ghosh. So speaking of ideology, where do you think your ideology could be placed in the left-right political spectrum? Let's change it to center-right spectrum if you will. And if your answer to that is you belong to the Indic ideology, then where could Indic ideology be placed in the spectrum? And also, do you agree that history bears testimony to the fact it is differences that led to further development of the nation state and not compromise?
Right. So the good part of, let's say, taking the Indic position is, on certain aspects such as environment, you may end up agreeing with the left. Okay? There's a good reason for that. Their goals may be different, which is they want to weaponize the tribal identity, they want to create a certain divisive tendency there. But if you end up giving space to the left on these critical issues, they will occupy the particular space. So my entire position has been, take those issues and bring forth your position. I'll give you a very concrete example. When the Section 377 case on gay rights was going on before the Supreme Court, churches were represented in the Supreme Court. I live tweeted those proceedings and I captured in their arguments. If you go and search for Section 377, JSI and I think it was 2018, you will find those tweets. Churches and their ministries are effectively represented in court. Not a single Hindu institution before the court explaining what is the Hindu or the Dharmic position on the Tritiya Prakati. No representation. No representation whatsoever. Bastar में अगर कुछ हो जाता है, you leave it to Sarvajadam or you leave it to other tribal organizations. आपके organizations को वहाँ पे जाना चाहिए because they are part of the Dharmic traditions. They are part of Sanatana Dharma. आपके representation को देखना चाहिए लोगों को. So the entire objective has been, at least my examination has been, इन मुद्दों से जितना आप बाहर रहेंगे और इनसे पीछे हटेंगे, they will be occupied by someone else. You must actively participate, but the reason why you are not participating is because you are unsure of your own position. Is because your preparation is not complete. Because you haven't built the database or the repository to respond on these issues. The ability to respond or participate in a debate is a function of two variables. एक तो है रीढ़ की हड्डी, which is you don't care about the audience and you have no stage to. It's just one aspect. But the second aspect is serious knowledge, depth, and preparation. These are aspects which I think, except for known individuals who've existed all along, एक mass में critical mass में create नहीं हुआ है. I'll give a straightforward suggestion to student organizations from the non-left. Not only should you be known for your ability to win elections, you should also be known for your intellectual prowess. So, nobody should be able to say that they can't hold their own in a particular debate. And you don't need to necessarily speak only in English to win a particular debate. Kanayappa doesn't speak in English, does he? He doesn't. So, where's the problem? The question is of depth in a particular subject, not necessarily the language it is conveyed in. It's unfortunate that I'm good in English and not so proficient in other languages. I don't think it's a matter of pride at all, under any circumstances. I think it's a matter of shame, but it reflects the product of the education system that I'm a product of. What can I do? I wish I had been trained differently. So I'm trying my best to actually train myself differently. But if there are people who've come from the native education systems, please don't fall back at all. These debates are your debates. Ultimately, this is about you. So please talk about it. So one final question. I'm told the usual culprits have done what is expected of them. So let's take one final question. Yes. Anyone, please choose. I know it's a lady who closes this. Yes, please. Yes. As a backbencher, I have backbenchers. Go on.
Namaskar everyone here, Jai Hind, Aditya this side, student of first year political science, Royal College. So to start with, right before the session began, we saw a glimpse of the Simon Go Back sort of movement where we got this piece of paper where it was written, Go Back, J.S.I. Deepak was mentioned there. So we have witnessed the so-called intellectualism, wokeism, hitting the sacred military, constitutional post, and all else that you have even covered in your speech as well, whether it is national education policy, Article 370, Kashmir issues and all that. So that we all are very much cognizant of, right? So where do you see this intellectualism and wokeism 10 or 20 years from now?
So, first of all, please don't compare me with the Simon Commission. I'd rather be seen as the person who tried to unfurl the tricolor on Mal Chowk. Okay? So, I think we are at a very, very critical juncture, and it's an Arya situation. If we don't support our positions, see, I made a comment during my opening remarks. If you just build on it in 30 seconds, I'll be done with that. See, the purpose of all these deliberations is not to become, I hate that term, YouTube influencer. Okay. Or a social media celebrity. It's useless. I don't see, I'm sorry, that tag disgusts me. I have nothing but contempt for it. At least I don't want to be associated with these terms. That's not what I'm hoping with. I see myself as a practicing Hindu who's hopefully a good lawyer and who's trying to combine the best of both worlds. That's it. I have no interest. I have zero interest in being any of these interests and all that. It makes no sense. It's not worth my time under any circumstances. So the goal is that you realize that there is a larger game. Look at what's happening in Ukraine. Please look at what's happening in Ukraine. If India were less powerful and less guarded, its fate could have been the same as Ukraine. It's not just about campus politics, it's global in nature. And such fantastic demographic dividend that we have, with brilliant minds, and hopefully for the next 30, 40 years we'll continue to produce people of this particular age group. We can't afford to lose this demographic dividend either in social media nonsense or in campus nonsense, as opposed to serious ideation. We need thought leaders. We need people who can think about, let's say, political science, strategic affairs, national security, demographic conversions, whatnot. We need serious scholarship. So the goal is, जो momentum है, उसको और धक्का देके you push it in that particular direction and allow more and more people to become stakeholders in this particular movement. Game चल रहा है तो वहाँ पे बैठे popcorn खाओ, game में participate करो, become a stakeholder, have a skill in this particular game. But remember one thing, this is not just a question of being able to mouth dialogues and rhetoric. It's fundamentally a test of Shastra. Are you in a position to take on a certain argument? Are you in a position to argue on a particular subject without a book, without a reading or whatnot? But remember, this equation is incomplete. I call it the SIP principle. Be spiritually fit, be intellectually fit, and also be physically fit. All three are important. Nothing is inside. Because when they know that they are on the verge of losing a debate, they resort to the streets. Okay? When they know that the primary gauntlet that they have thrown at you, which is knowledge, that knowledge doesn't support them, that history doesn't support them, and logic doesn't support them, out comes the true color, which is fashion of the first one. Okay? So therefore, don't operate in silos. You need all three variables in this entire procedure. You need it. Don't underestimate the ability of a certain response if that's the language that they understand. That's what they keep saying. So focus, start with seriousness and start with preparation. And these years in college, apart from all these serious topics, my entire thing has also been that this shouldn't be a situation of these 3 years. We shouldn't look back and say what a poisonous, toxic atmosphere I was a part of. Unfortunately, that's what it is becoming. You are supposed to go back with memories, and hopefully when you have a reunion, you look at the person as opposed to the ideology that he was at this association with. But I don't think that's possible anymore. Boyfriends and mates and friends are chosen exclusively on the basis of political ideology. Unfortunately. So unfortunate. So I certainly believe that we are open to engagement and discussion, negotiation, and for a debate. Let the other side prove if it has the confidence for it. That's it.
So my question is, little off the topic.
Mahadev sir. Thanks for having me.
बहुत सारे काम कर रहा है अम्बेडकर की राइटिंग्स को पढ़ के we all can pretty much discern what his views on Hinduism are. He has said all kind of wild things about Prabhu Shri Ram, Shri Krishna and everyone else.
Correct.
The state is eulogizing him simply.
Right.
Push कर रहे हैं साइके में सबके and I simply want to ask कितना detrimental होगा ये हिंदू इंटरेस्ट के अभी लग रहा है कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन पे पीरियड बन के अच्छा बट लॉन्ग रन में हम सिविलाइजेशन स्टेट को एडवोकेट कर रहे हैं और फिर एक ऐसे व्यक्ति को यूटिलाइज कर रहे हैं जो हमारे प्रभु को गाली दे रहा है
ठीक है एक कन्फेशन के साथ शुरू करते हैं You know for a fact that I am eulogized in some of my videos on this. Okay. And I have also taken a position much to the anger of a lot of people about reservations also. Right? I have said this at least in 2 places. I wrote up to each of these statements. I am not someone who is going to run away from what I have said. People evolve, that's a different issue, but I will explain it. Okay. 3. Have I changed in my opinions? Because I can't criticize someone else unless and until I come clean on my own position in the first place. Okay? So, what is my position? My position is, and I think I said this on the Times Now debate, that Dr. Ambedkar is a mixed bag. I said this very clear. Okay? तो आप उनसे उन चीजों को चुनिए जो आपको लगता है कि आपकी विचारधारा से या फिर आपके एंड गोल से मेल खाता है. And never forget the fact that he didn't convert out of Hinduism. वो उसके बाहर नहीं गए. Okay? But I certainly agree that whenever his opinions on Hinduism are to be consumed, consume them not with a pinch of salt. Then, which is why I am saying, economics पे हो सकता है कि आप उनको थोड़ा और ज़्यादा पढ़िए. Law पे maybe to some extent, okay. But जब इतिहास या हिंदू धर्म की बात आती है, understand it as perhaps the anger of a certain person. उसको सत्य मान के आप आगे मत बढ़िए. Okay. Respect the sentiment, but not necessarily the projection of facts from him. That is the limited position. That way, you respect the sentiment of people who are affected, and you also reserve the right to say, but I disagree with you, where you say this has been the entire history of the civilization. वो हम मान नहीं सकते हैं क्योंकि वो सत्य नहीं है. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. 3, when I speak on reservations, people say, what is this? How can you use your own personal experience and say, because I come from a low middle class family, you relate to what has happened to other people, and therefore you say they should be entitled to reservations? No. आप थोड़ा long term सोचिए. आपके पास एंटी कन्वर्जन लॉस नहीं है, नहीं है. जब भी आते हैं उनको कोई ना कोई उड़ा देता है, right? I think only in Madhya Pradesh there is an adhiniyam on धर्म परिवर्तन, and there is one in Odisha, and that too they were, by the way, they came about in the Congress regime in the 50s and 60s. Okay, but I also coming. Now when this happens, when you don't have that, and हर जगह से आपके लोगों को कन्वर्ट करने की कोशिश हो रही है. इन बात में और देखिए through force or whatever it is, एक ही जोकर है आपके entire pack of cards में, which is reservation in this point, right? I would say the day when your institutions, your religious institutions, have the freedom to use their money to subsidize education of all these people who are affected, the need for a reservation perhaps may be obviated on its own. क्योंकि स्टेट ये कभी नहीं करेगा. Take this again. ये स्टेट कभी नहीं करेगा, कोई भी सरकार नहीं करेगी. Therefore, इसका response society से आना चाहिए, wherein you are in a position to offer alternatives to reservation. Therefore, as opposed to state-based affirmative action, can you have a society-based affirmative action where the society takes responsibility for this and says, मंदिरों का जो पैसा है, जो रिसोर्स है, उसमें से 15 या 20% हम इसके लिए earmark करके रख देंगे. So वेद को भी पढ़ाएंगे, गौशाला भी चलाएंगे और ये भी करेंगे किसी भी हालत में. And you treat this particular door or the slot as a revolving door, which means it's not necessarily that the same community constantly benefits from this. If you think of, let's say, every society or every community moving in a certain direction, तो आज community X हो सकता है जो इसका beneficiary हो, कल कोई और हो सकता है, but within the Hindu fold, right? When you try and do that, you have solutions to offer. Now, what are we doing? We are taking a shot at this particular institution without offering a credible solution to the other real-time dangers that we have. That is where my entire position has come from. Okay? I am not against merit. How can I be against merit, particularly when I know for a fact that the scope for merit is only shrinking further and further, pure merit. Okay? And I completely understand the angst of students who are aspiring for NEET or let's say post-graduation medical institutions. I am not against you. I am not against any of you. I am merely taking a big picture position which is not limited only to you. So you may have a legitimate grievance against me for the positions that I have taken, but I am looking at the big picture. And I am hoping that if the society can give credible alternatives to reservation, then you can do away with it. But जब तक ये नहीं होता है, creamy layer आप ठीक से हटवा नहीं पा रहे. Reservation को हटा देंगे. You are not even able to do this after a couple of generations. You are benefiting from this particular system. You have such a resistance. How is this going to happen? Because the state and parties have a very clear vested interest in talking about this on a regular basis. और ये इसको encourage करते जाएंगे. So the society has to talk. Who's going to talk about this, right? So my entire evolution has been, I certainly believe that he has his merits, but he also has very serious problems in the manner in which he's taken pot shots at Hinduism. 100%. On those aspects, I don't agree with him at all. For that matter, I certainly don't agree with certain aspects of him, Satya Prakash, completely. How can I? But at the end of it, because this happens to be Hinduism, हम फतवे तो ये जाएंगे करेंगे, हम क्या कहेंगे, sorry, I disagree with you, I don't follow you, period. So I've given this example before. Thanks for pointing it out. I've given the example. I'll just answer this question. Just one example I've given you with that. जब भी दलित डिस्कोर्स की बात होती है या रिजर्वेशन की बात होती है, it starts and ends with Dr. Ambedkar. When in fact the entire movement had a lot of other representatives. So I have even spoken of MC Raja, who was a Dalit representative from Trichinopalli, which is Trichy. When he was given the offer to convert to Christianity by the missionaries, they approached him and others. He says, "आपको क्या लगता है? हम धर्म परिवर्तन के लिए लड़ रहे हैं? नहीं, मैं हिंदू हूँ और हिंदू ही मरूंगा. But my point is, मुझे भी I want dignity. I want to be treated with dignity, and I am not going to ask for the annihilation of the faith system of my ancestors." He says that very clearly. So you start with diversification of the Dalit discourse. You present all of those aspects. It was not a one-man movement at all under any circumstances. And considering the diversity in this country, the caste reality or the Varna reality of a particular part of Maharashtra cannot be the reality of the rest of the country. Everywhere it has changed. I'll give you a straight-up example. Rabindranath Tagore comes from the Brahmin community of Bengal, but he was a landowning Brahmin. That could be equally set up, let's say, perhaps certain significant portions of Kerala Nambudris. But Tamil Brahmins have not been landowning. Telugu Brahmins have not been landowning. Kannada Brahmins have not been landowning. So the myth that land being ke haath mein hai, dharm being ke haath mein hai, all of these aspects, first of all, don't apply across the country. This is the diversity of this land. Ownership of land, ownership of resources, the power politics, or let's say the hierarchy changes from place to place. The decentralization and diversification of this discourse is extremely important. When you do that, then you will have greater arguments to present. In the जब इतने सारे तथ्य हैं और इतने सारे facts हैं, why are we fixating on one particular individual? I'm not saying ignore the individual. I'm certainly not going to say that. But I'm saying और भी लोग थे और हैं आज भी. That's it. Okay, so I'm told that I've completely run out of time. Your questions may be short, my answers are never short. Yeah, go on. Please.
So thank you, sir.
Yeah, my answer is
So, my name is Aditya. I have done engineering from the States and the same time I've done from India. So, you did say about the academic perspective, especially as unique to the humanities, in the sense that it's a bit different. Given that, right now with the pandemic and all these...
If I may, let me do something. I'll give the coordinates to the organizers. I don't want to certainly inconvenience the management. They've been kind enough to host us for such a long time.
Can we meet after this?
If I'm safe outside the campus, you Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Namaste to one and all present over here. I consider it a privilege to get this opportunity of offering a vote of thanks on this very special occasion. On behalf of Team YUVA and Hansraj College, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude towards Advocate J.S.I. Deepakji for addressing us all today on a topic of immense importance. As we celebrate Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, we consider it our responsibility to facilitate such conversation on important ideas and issues that decisively impact our nation's progress. We are confident that today's session with a legal luminary like Sai Deepakji has helped further polish our ideas on those final aspects that come together to define our national identity. Sir, we are honored to have hosted you today and thank you for taking out precious time to enlighten all of us. We also are extremely grateful to Professor Avanti Bhattacharya, who moderated the session with immaculate efficiency and grace. Thank you so much, ma'am, for directing the conversation brilliantly and ensuring that everything happened as smoothly as possible. This event could have been successfully conducted only because of the unconditional support offered by the principal of Hansraj College, Professor Rama Sharma. We thank ma'am for her constant guidance that has always kept us motivated to conduct such events. We are also profusely grateful to our Chief Guest, Honorable Dean of Colleges, University of Delhi, Professor Balram Anand, for gracing the occasion and also offering his priceless words of wisdom. We also owe a debt of gratitude to our guest of honor, former Mayor and Chief Proctor, University of Delhi, Professor Rajniya, for enthusiastically supporting this endeavor and contributing to the discussion with very constructive insights. Thanks are also due to all the volunteers from YUVA who put in relentless efforts to ensure a seamless flow of events. And most importantly, this event could never have been as successful without the support of all those who attended the program today and participated with such great enthusiasm in the discussion. Thank you all for being a patient audience. Once again, thanks a lot to each one of you for making this event successful. Now, we would like to bring this conversation to a holistic culmination by chanting the Kalyan. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kashchid Dukha Bhave. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
भारत माता की जय।
As a request to all of you that if you want to sign books, so is it possible in this auditorium at present? So we all need to work including sir. So if there's any decision that sir is going to get into the book signing session, so it will be outside, not within. So with us, we all of you please proceed towards the exit. Thank you.